I want us to become brothers again like we used to be, and for us to find ourselves and bond with each other. Can we agree to that?
Opinions vary.
Welcome to Three Brothers Filmcast. I'm Anders Bergstrom, and I'm here with my brothers,
Anton.
And Aaron.
My last name is the same as my brother's.
And this month we're discussing James Gunn's new film, Superman. We'll also compare the film to previous cinematic versions of Superman and figure out how it fits into the overall DC cinematic universe. As always, we want to thank you for listening and for your support. We also would love for you to leave a brief review or star rating. We're an independent podcast and we rely on you, our listeners, to spread the word. So please rate, review, like, and share. Thanks so much, and now on to the show.
And here we go.
Superman is the most iconic superhero, and the one who really inaugurates the superhero as superpowered hero, what this new film calls a metahuman. More than just being a costume crime fighter or vigilante, a la Zorro or the Scarlet Pimpernel. He's also one of the true mythic figures of the modern era. As Anton noted in his review of Man of Steel, per C.S. Lewis, a myth being a story where the mere pattern of events is all that matters. So, revisiting Superman, more than any other superhero, recalls a series of images and tropes, which, with some variation and evolution, define the character across the mythos. James Gunn is a filmmaker who delights in sarcastic and callously violent filmmaking, illustrated with bright, technicolor pop cultural accompaniment, as in his popular Guardians of the Galaxy films from Marvel, The Suicide Squad, or his more subversive earlier work. His films revel in a kind of above-it-all knowingness, at the same time that they embrace some of the more out-there and relatively unknown aspects of comic book fandom. Enter 2025's version of Superman. Despite my initial misgivings, there's some things to commend the film for. The core cast of David Corenswet as Superman, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, and Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor impressed me. And because of Gunn's love for some of the more arcane and wacky bits of Superman lore, the film has a playfulness and touch of goofiness that fits some of the best bits of Silver Age Superman comic books. But frankly, I'm not sure that Gunn's the right director for the character. People on the internet are celebrating his Superman as some kind of correction to the darkness and grandiosity of Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill's Superman films. But for all of Corenswet's light touch with the character, the film is filled with moments of incredible cynicism. The plot is overly busy at the same time, that there's very little for some of the characters to do. Particularly Lois Lane, who mostly follows around Edie Gathege's Mr. Terrific. Even Superman is sidelined for long periods of the film in Luthor's pocket universe prison. Introducing multiple metahumans while simultaneously beginning in medias res and skipping the origin story that we all know, it seems to me to rob the title character of some of his gravitas. And then, Gunn makes some subtle, but in my opinion fatal revisions to some of Superman's core mythos.
Okay, Ramblers, let's get rambling.
So, ultimately, I'm very torn with this film. But what did you guys think? Anton, you've written the most about Superman for our site. Is James Gunn's Superman film a good film? And maybe, alternatively, is it a good retelling of the Superman myth? What did you think?
I think James Gunn is very successful at turning Superman into a Marvel movie. If the whole idea was to say, okay, DC felt that their experiments with Snyder and other people weren't quite working out, some things hit, some things didn't, and they just want the consistency of Marvel Studios, so they're just going to create DC Studios, then James Gunn has delivered what they wanted. So I'll commend him for that. But at the same time, I think that this film makes some core mistakes with the Superman character from my interpretation of him. But I will also point out that I think the movie has a sort of light touch that does evoke Silver Age comics, where you pick it up, you don't quite entirely understand all the stuff that was preceding, all the different universes and characters. And so if you can just sort of turn your mind off and enjoy the entertainment in that sense, then I think the movie works. Does it work as a Superman movie to my liking? No.
What about you, Aaron? What did you think of James Gunn's Superman?
I thought it was kind of a tremendously cynical movie. And for a movie that's
posited and talked about in such a way as this bright, cheery corrective. It's the thing we need right now. The world is so dark and gloomy, but luckily we have Superman finally back being, aw shucks, golly gee, Superman on the big screen. My reaction when I heard all this and then I watched the movie, and I didn't go in wanting to dislike the movie. Partially because I actually like some of Gunn's stuff. I don't love it all. Like something like Guardians of the Galaxy 2 I find tremendously troubling as a hero movie. But I thought Peacemaker and
Have you seen the third
Squad
one?
were like decent. No, I haven't watched 3. And I was curious. I'm like, is Gunn gonna like change how he approaches storytelling for Superman? And the answer is no. He kind of just does his Gunn thing, which means that the movie is tremendously sentimental in a like corny sense, I guess, but in my sense is a kind of a juvenile sense. And then it is tremendously like in your face, smugly. What's the term you said, Anders, earlier, where it's like his movies are terrifically
They're cynical and they're callously violent.
yeah, callous. They're callous. They're so blasé about the violence and about the humor and about who you're supposed to be laughing at when, that I was kind of shocked that the movie does both things simultaneously while trying to posit this idea of like Superman heroism and old-fashioned goodness at the same time. And so this is why my big takeaway, and I've argued with a lot of more people about this movie than a lot of movies I would say in recent years, frankly, was that I was like, did I watch a completely different movie than the rest of you? Because in my sense, this movie was a complete tonal miscalculation, and they seemed to think it was great.
Yes. Because like my kind of like expanding on my take, I went into the movie not particularly excited because I didn't like the trailers.
Yep.
Right.
Same here.
And then I heard everyone saying how this is this return to a sort of Silver Age version of Superman, and in the first, I don't know, even like 10 minutes, with the Fortress of Solitude and the robots and crypto and all that kind of stuff, I was kind of like, okay. Yep. And even the first scene of Superman fighting the Ultraman or the Hammer of Baravia over Metropolis, I was like, okay, I'm maybe I could be okay with this. This could be it. Kind of like I could see in those opening scenes how people were saying there was the bits of Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman, right? Which seems to be a very conscious influence in certain things. Even the first appearance of him as Clark Kent with the big, sort of hunched over with the tousled hair, it very much looks like the way Quitely illustrates him. But then we start get these Gunnisms. We get like ridiculous like characters being like awful and like mean, and you get like dumb pop songs, and I'm sorry, like, but there's this kind of like, what the film wants to do is like show how much it knows about comic books at the same time that it's always at an arm's length from it, right? And I almost wanted to say it's like James Gunn is like the comic book guy from Simpsons making superhero movies, like he's always kind of like, I know more about comic books than anyone, and yet I'm a little bit above it, and I don't like that, and it really is a shame because we'll get into it a bit later, but like there's some things I did like about the film.
I think that this movie, I agree with you guys that I feel like I'm watched a different movie than the reaction, or at least the initial reaction that I was reading about online. And it's really funny because there's a part in the movie where Lex Luthor is revealed to have raging monkeys typing out reactions in some sort of, maniacal bot farm in his pocket galaxy. And I couldn't help but wonder to myself how much of this movie is the movie we need for this moment. It offers the hope we need, was just bot farmed.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to dig forever into whether this is the case. I will point out that a hell of a lot of money is riding on this film, so it had to be successful. Because the entire DC Studios universe and everything they have planned, if this movie failed, would end it. So there's a lot on that. But what I mean by that is that all of the reactions that people say of like, it felt so different, they're all the stuff in the trailer.
Yeah.
Like Superman, our first image of Superman, boom, cratering into, the Arctic waste, and he's bleeding and spitting out chunks, and he's calling for his dog. And then we go to the Fortress of Solitude, And then we get, the moment where it's like Superman Clark Kent's idealism versus Lois's cynicism in a fairly well crafted scene where she's interviewing him as Superman. But that was all revealed in the trailer.
Yeah.
And then if you take out those scenes, I was like, okay, where is this sort of like hope and idealism that you're going for?
Yeah.
All I got at the end was a stupid monologue about how my mistakes are what make me human, and that's my superpower. And I was like, what? Like, it's like...
Yeah, I'm like,
I'm not even sure he really made that many mistakes, to be honest, but...
Yeah. But you also have superpowers.
He just kind of got manipulated by people, yeah.
I don't know. So...
When I think about the monkeys, I again thought of The Simpsons. It's like Mr. Burns, and,
yes.
in the
and that's the sort of thing.
1,000 typers. Soon they'll have written the greatest. Yeah,
that's the sort of thing where like Gunn can make a slick, fun movie. I can't help but smirk when Superman's just chilling out with his hot cocoa, and in the background, it's the Justice Gang fighting a guy in the background, and you laugh because you're like, that's clever. Yeah. But what I've realized is that Gunn is like. He's sort of like a mid-tier studio auteur. And what I mean by that is that he has his signature. You watch this movie and you're like, this is definitely a James Gunn movie. And not everyone who makes studio products makes these sorts of movies that you can recognize. But at the same time, it's like the guy has like 5 plays. And all the best plays in this movie I'd already seen in Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, we're going to have a nice deep cut, cool action scene where it's one take and the camera's swirling around. We already had that in Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's that scene. So there's that scene when Mr. Terrific and Lois are going to the entrance to the Pocket Universe, and I'm like, it reminds me of that scene I hated in Guardians 2 when Yondu kills all the guys. And
yes, it's the arrow scene.
And I'm like, it's the exact same scene.
Yeah.
It is the exact same scene, and that scene disgusted me with its callousness for like, and I'm like, dude, you were just replaying the hits, and that scene doesn't. I guess we're supposed to be like Lois, but again, it puts Lois into this like passive observing kind of thing, which to me, again, that the thing that bugged me about the film in some ways is that it wasted like a Lois. After the interview, you're like, oh, are we gonna get a Lois who is like the reporter who's going to go after the like really tough thing in a way that actually Amy Adams' Lois was a little bit.
They don't pursue that aspect beyond that interview scene to any depth, where you're like, there would have been the potential for like, we're going to push things, and then you get the other stuff we'll obviously address that you're like, you can't do that with Superman, sorry, but
yeah.
No, I was just going to say like the Mr. Terrific bubble scene I think is one of the 2 scenes in the movie that I think sums up the tone issues so well. Is that is a scene that takes place after... Okay, the first is the kaiju scene, where Superman spends all this time saying, why are you going to kill it? Don't kill it. We should, like, take this away. And, like, he makes a point of saving a squirrel and saving a dog. And, like, just does absurd things to be like, I can't let anything die in this moment of this thing destroying the city. As a rebuke to Snyder, right?
Yep.
But then the Justice Gang is like, oh, you're stupid. They kill it. Anyway, doesn't matter. So Superman says his thing, but the movie gets to have his cake and eat it too.
But again,
yes.
But like, what? So is the movie aligned?
It's insulting to Superman.
Who's the movie aligned with then?
No, exactly. And then it shows you who it's actually aligned with, because it goes to the Mr. Terrific scene, which is Mr. Terrific dispatching the guys. There's some quibbling about whether he kills them or not. Doesn't matter. You're supposed to be delighting in the fact that he's just owning guys, like absolutely owning them. They can do nothing, and his whiz doodads, he could kill them if he wanted. Doesn't really matter if he does or doesn't, because he can just destroy them. And Lois is in this bubble, and she's like amazed at his ability to do this. And we're supposed to be amazed, and we got the pop beat going, and we got the one shot, and we were all taken up in this incredible action sequence, and we're supposed to be like, wow, that's awesome. In a way that we're never supposed to say Superman saving the squirrel's awesome. We're supposed to say, wow, that's old-fashioned and corny. So the movie actually is more on the Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, Hawk, and then the thing that culminates it is Hawkgirl kills the president of Bravia, and you're supposed to laugh at it. The movie Superman's never like, you killed the president of the country. Like, that is not what I was going to do when I was stopping this war. The movie never scolds her, never does anything. People are like, it's this really interesting tension between the Justice Gang and them. I'm like, there's no tension. Superman says like 3 things, but at any moment when he's actually going to pull them back from doing violence, he doesn't. He just lets them do it anyway.
Because the joke is always more important than any overall governing feature of these films.
Yes. And at the end of the movie, it's kind of like, well, we're all friends. I called in some friends. I'm like, you're not friends with these guys. They're other metahumans. They're other superheroes. But I thought the movie was presenting that you have fundamental philosophical differences with them. But it seems like you're all one team. And that ultimately the end result is all that matters. He also kills Ultraman. He doesn't break his neck, but he throws him into a black hole.
Or at least allows him to die kind of like Bruce.
Batman and
Batman Begins.
I don't have to kill you, but I don't have to save you.
But where's the moral choice? What I'm saying is that you can disagree with the Snyder, but this movie never puts Superman in the choice that it does in Man of Steel of like, will you kill Zod or you're going to do your ideals? Snyder wants to interrogate this. This movie has no interest in interrogating that. It says both tensions can exist simultaneously and we can be happy.
This is what I find utterly bizarre, and I don't want to spend this entire podcast talking about Snyder versus Gunn, but you're like, I'm completely bewildered by the fact that people are like, okay, finally we're getting a message of hope and idealism for Superman. And when you rewatch Man of Steel, that's a movie that is 100% interested in what an ideal does for not only a human being or an individual, but also on sort of a macro level, what it can do for a society or even potentially a world. That's literally the theme of the movie. And Jor-El spends time saying, I'm going to send you, and you're going to be someone who's better than them. And what that will do is provide a symbol or an example that they can all aspire to.
That's what this symbol means. The symbol of the House of El means hope. Embodied within that hope is the fundamental belief in the potential of every person to be a force for good. That's what you can bring them.
And I was like, that movie thematically was all about hope and idealism. And it presented that, and took the Nolan approach and said, okay, and we're going to set that inside what we're trying to make as a very realistic world. Here I get a version of Superman that I'm told is idealistic. I'm told it's grappling with our geopolitics. And I'll say this is one of the stupidest movies I've ever seen in terms of geopolitics. We literally have what? Like,
how about
a
geography?
Central Asian country where we all have pitchforks? That was like one of the most stupid and insulting things I've ever seen, where like, they can't have an army. They literally have pitchforks. I was like, what?
One guy's holding a cinder block.
Yeah. Guys, I don't want to get into too much of that, but the people who think that this movie is somehow an allegory for Ukraine or Gaza or something like that, I'm like, you are revealing how much contempt you have for the people in those conflicts, because and also it's so unrealistic. Like, you're just going to drive your tanks over the border and there's a bunch of people, about, I don't know, maybe 5,000 people standing there. Come on. Like, it's so fake. It's so poorly conceived. It just, like, it literally makes no sense.
And the geography, like, is so artificial because it's like, there's the one side and there's just kind of like this dusty patch where the people are standing on. But you'd say the same thing about this metropolis. This metropolis has no geography either.
But Marvel films don't have geography, right? Where Batman versus Superman, I'm sorry, Batman vs. Superman has geography.
Exactly. And Marvel films are just a camera spiraling around.
Very clearly situated. And
it's fake geography.
Like, I hope people are going to be complaining about all the people whose houses and clearly weren't evacuated in time when Luthor splits the city with the...
No, but don't evacuate the city. That always works. The whole city left.
Oh, yeah, okay. Gotcha.
No, but that's literally the logic and people will say, well, it's a Silver Age comic. You shouldn't look too much into it. And it's like, then why do you have the stupid, like, geopolitical allegory stuff?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Why don't you just get all goofy? Why
I would
even
have preferred that, frankly.
But this is the thing. The movie is cynical because it's trying to do both, and it knows it's trying to do both, and it thinks that the audience is stupid, and they'll eat it up, and the audience will eat it up. I'm not saying people who like this movie are stupid, but the movie thinks they're stupid.
Yeah.
So this guy just flew into Midtown and started attacking people, demanding for Superman to show up?
Yeah, it's all there in my article.
And I'd actually have to make it through your writing, Clark. Knowledge is worth many sacrifices. That isn't one of them.
Ha ha ha, very funny, Lois.
Oh my God, he's so fine.
22 people in the hospital, over 20 million in property damage. It does make you wonder.
Wonder what?
As great as he is, maybe Superman didn't completely think through the ramifications of the Bravia thing.
Well, if this guy is even from Bravia.
What do you mean? His name is the Hammer of Bravia.
Yeah, I doubt his parents named him that, Jimmy. We have no clue what his actual goal was here.
I think it's pretty obvious the goal was kicking Superman's ass.
He didn't completely kick Superman's ass.
Pretty thoroughly, Clark.
And it's the kind of movie where, like, you know, okay, I like a lot of people are also like, you know, oh, like this is, you know, this Lex Luthor is sort of, it's clearly sort of an Elon Musk figure, and you know the Baravians, we have to be thinking about, you know, like, oh, obviously Russia or any, you know, Belarussia maybe, like, and you're just sort of like, okay, but like this is the most cartoonish version of all these sorts of things. Plus, we're all forgetting that Jesse Eisenberg already played, you know, like he already played
Mark
a tech bro
Zuckerberg
guy.
as Lex Luthor. Yeah.
Yes.
No, actually, I actually liked Holt's Lex Luthor mostly. Like his character, he does remind me of the Silver Age Lex Luthor, you know, who's a little more, he has his, you know, pocket universes and his technology and all his stuff all over. He's not just a businessman. He is kind of like the evil mad scientist kind of character. I wish they would have leaned even more into that.
He's deliciously unhinged, but so is like every single Lex Luthor in the movies. Like, I guess what I'm just saying is, like, I think Nicholas Hoult does a good job here. I agree with you that they've boosted sort of his mad scientist aspect, but like, you know, Lex Luthor's always been kind of like, you're gonna chew the scenery and we're gonna enjoy that.
Yeah, you guys are in the same page as me with this movie, but I think what's actually the most disappointing.
No, I think I'm more negative, frankly.
Yeah.
Because aside from the casting, but
I was just gonna say this is where it's like
this movie.
It feels like missed, like I had, you know, I actually really love Henry Cavill as Superman, but I was really skeptical when I saw some of the test photos of Cornsweet as Superman and stuff, but actually in the movie, I'm like, no, okay, I buy him. He's good. He has the, you know, stature, and actually I wanted to see more of him as Clark, to be honest, because I thought the brief scene we get at the Daily Planet, I know, it's like, I wanted more of that.
It's a problem with all the recent Supermans. Clark Kent is downgraded in importance. I think Cornsweet, like, the worst features of Cornsweet were, like, in the marketing, there's some strange, like, manipulation, or, like, you know, like, it's just, when you actually see him on screen as actual person, you're like, he actually fits the role. They've done something with some of the posters I've seen that are very bizarre.
Yeah, I know. They did something with his, like, the way he looks and some of the promotional stuff. Because then I also saw him in interviews and stuff, and he's a charming and nice guy. He seems, you know, like...
Which is why I wish they would have leaned into him as Clark Kent a bit more.
Yes, exactly.
But again, this movie has zero time for that kind of, like, mundane world aspects. Like, it spends a little bit of that only to amp things up. But then, like, it's just... we're bombarded with, like, you know, different galaxies, pocket galaxies, new characters. And I'm still left with my feeling of, like, after Justice League in my review, I Snyder's cut of Justice League, I said that it's like, this is, you know, the best and last, you know, intergalactic sort of superhero movie I need to see. And I still sort of feel like that, because to what Aaron was saying, about halfway through the movie, once it totally became invested in all sorts of super meta-human characters and multiple universes, or whatever we're talking about, these pocket galaxies, my interest completely declined. And once we got into that sort of ugly Marvel CGI world, where it's just like people sliding through kind of a digital goo that was supposed to be some sort of, like, I don't know, proton soup or something. I don't know. I detach.
I just was going to say that I think it's what I, you know, in my introduction, what I was gesturing to, I think this script is a mess, actually. I think that it goes all over the place. It doesn't set up any really clear structure for what Superman is supposed to do. Like, Superman is, like, essentially sidelined for big chunks of the movie. And I think it's a fatal mistake, actually, to bring the Justice Gang in this movie, because this is supposed to be the reintroduction of Superman. But they're, like, doing, all the things that they lambasted, say, Dawn of Justice and other films for, is like they're trying to fast forward, bringing in this whole new DC cinematic universe stuff. And I'm like, we didn't need Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl and Mr. Terrific and all these other characters, regardless of what you think of them. It distracts from Superman.
It's the summary test. Like, and a lot of Marvel movies fail it. A lot of, frankly, big pictures these days fail it, where I'm saying, okay, tell me what that movie was about. What happened in it? And you can't tell me in a few sentences, like, what actually, like, beyond kind of the blurb of, like, Superman had a conflict where he interceded in the, preventing a war, and now he has to face something. Okay, go beyond that. Tell me what happened after that. It's really hard to describe what happened in this movie because there isn't a clear story. It's a whole bunch of plot, not a good story.
Yeah.
It's because the movie doesn't really have anything to tell you about Superman visually, thematically, and narratively beyond the things that are gestured at in the promotions for the movie, frankly. And it's one of the things that I haven't got a chance to actually ask people about it who really like this movie. And I'm very curious because I rewatched Superman the movie the day before seeing this. I rewatched Superman 2 afterwards. I rewatched some of the Fleischer Studios short films. And I've, as being a Zack Snyder fan, as we all are to varying degrees, Man of Steel and especially Batman vs. Superman are in my mind a lot in terms of imagery specifically. And I was like, what shot in this movie of Superman is actually gives you the tingles and is inspiring and makes you be like, wow, that's a hero. The only shot I can possibly think of is when he stops the building from falling on the woman and then it falls and there's like a cloud of dust and the camera pulls really out and he's this one single spot of color on the screen with this kind of dusty background and people are like, wow, one of the shots of the year. And I'm like, that shot is literally just digital soup. It's literally let's just make the whole frame blah and then the only point of color is him and that's supposed to be thematic. It's like, compare that to however grandiose and histrionic and operatic it is, a shot of a woman on top of a rooftop in the midst of a hurricane reaching out to Superman in slow motion like he's God come to save her. Or the shot of Superman on the ground learning to fly for the first time in Man of Steel where the ground's rumbling and then he shoots up literally like a rocket taking off. Those kind of shots, I don't care what you think about the Snyder thematic or tonal take on the hero. Those shots convey something about who this figure is. This movie has none of that. None. There's not a single moment in this movie where you're like, that Superman leaves you in awe. He leaves you sometimes kind of like, ooh, Superman's nerdy cool. But there's nothing like, whoa, Superman will lead me more.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Crypto gets the more fun scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Frankly.
I think
probably steals the show.
There are a couple of shots I liked of him flying and with his cape. They kind of, I think, were purposely modeled on a couple of the Alex Ross kind of paintings. Like when he rises, there's one scene where he rises, but I can't. But again, I might be actually thinking of the posters and things, right? It's not.
So
I'm trying
there was a shot where it's a sort of a slow ascent to reveal him sort of coming out, and there's sort of light coming through dust and all this sort of stuff.
But that's about it.
I would say that execution is less heroic, less aware of art history than anything in Snyder's versions or even in Bryan Singer's Superman Returns. Those films reach back to, especially Snyder, reach back to Renaissance art to try to how do you convey kind of a superhuman body. Mm-hmm. And there's no sense that Gunn's even aware of these sorts of things. I would say one of the best visuals of Superman, which is kind of nifty, was him flying back to the Fortress of Solitude really fast. And it's kind of a medium close-up of Superman from the side while he's flying. And you can see how the weather changes behind him. in super fast speed while he's going there. So all of a sudden it's like lightning, and then it's like lighter, and like, so it's like, it's an interesting way to convey what, like, how you'd sort of see weather and the atmospherics around him if he's going that speed back across like part of the world. But again, it's not, it's like a kind of, Gunn has some nifty visuals and some cool visuals, but there's nothing that's, I would say, like, as artistic as even the Bryan Singer, which I don't love that movie.
I would go further, and I actually would say this movie's ugly.
Could this movie have just been entirely generated by AI?
Yeah.
No,
kind
but
of.
like, I'm not even saying the CGI or some of the design choices. I actually think it's shot in an ugly manner where I think the camera is like slightly too close to people's faces throughout almost the entirety of the film, and they're always center framed, and it's very unflattering because it's really top heavy light, and it's just like there's such a flat visual approach to this film that I'm like, even in the Mr. Terrific scene, I'm not really impressed because the camera has no weight. Nothing in that scene has weight. It's like the Marvel movies again. And so I'm like, well, yeah, there's a lot of like complicated blocking happening, but the blocking's digital blocking, but it like, and people are like, well, you like Snyder, so how can you, again, I don't want to make everything about Snyder, but you take like the warehouse fight in Batman vs. Superman. I'm like, that scene has tons of weight. It's like people going through things and like wood breaking and like an actual kind of physical matter to the objects on screen. That's just gone here. And again, comic book, Silver Age, we're not supposed to overthink it. And I find that so insulting to the idea of like the old Superman movie with Christopher Reeve is corny and old fashioned and is tonally much lighter than this movie. But it's also so much more serious than this movie.
But the original Superman is operating in a space that doesn't exist really anymore. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that there's a range of genre films that achieved both the silly and the sublime in the same film. I'm thinking of things like Forbidden Planet, silly goofball robot, and then there's also like visuals and ideas that are like so intensely profound. And that's this in Donner's Superman is operating that way. He's aspiring for like, David Lean epic at times. And then there's just also like, now we have time for like a really silly moment with Luthor and his sidekicks.
Yes. And again, not perfect, not a perfect movie, but it has a grandeur to it that conveys something about the character formally. And I don't think this movie conveys anything formally. I think you can say that, again, it pays lip service in moments and there's ideas present in the movie. I'm really disappointed with the execution. I wish I could be caught up with this kind of stuff because there's a lot of movies, especially over the last few years, where I don't go really see movies that I think I'm not going to like.
Yeah.
I've become pretty easy on a lot of movies. Like, it doesn't take that much to get me swept up in like a big spectacle, frankly. Like, I was rewatching Transformers the other day and being like, this kind of works as like a Spielberg. No, but like a Spielberg plot of a teenager. He's discovered this hidden world and there's an adventure aspect. And I'm like, Bay actually hits story beats. Where are the story beats in this movie?
Hell, I was like, Jurassic World Rebirth just gave me the silly dinosaur action movie that I wanted. And I was like forgiving of that movie because it had a low bar of expectation and it met it. And it knew what it was trying to do. Whereas this movie captures our age and like on a visual level, you're like, because Aaron, this movie's composed to be watched on your phone.
and yes, and yet
that's why it has all the close-ups.
It looks nothing like our actual world. Like when you go outside. I was just thinking,
neither does what we watch on our phone.
Exactly. The blockbuster that I watched last week was I finally caught up with F1, and Joseph Kosinski knows how to shoot movies that both contain real human beings in them, and people complained a lot about the product placement. I'm like, it's an F1 movie, and that's the world that these people inhabit in, Abu Dhabi and Monaco and things like that. But it looks like our world. And the characters are, yes, it's a cliched sports movie in a lot of ways, but it delivers a very simple plot structure, has real characters, and I'm just like, I'm shocked at the people who panned that and are giving this high praise. I'm just like, you exist in a different reality than me. It's bizarre.
But they do. They do. Everybody exists in a different reality. That's the thing. There's no monoculture, which is why people can watch this movie and come away with really wild. Even a lot of the people who hate this movie, the reason they hate it like baffles me too. Where I'm just like, that's what you're focusing. Like, what do you? What?
So, before we move to like, I guess, other Superman stuff, are there features of this movie that you want to talk about in a little bit more depth? Like, is there anything? Is there scenes that you sort of thought stood out? Was there particular issues? Like, I think we have to talk about the dealing of how it deals with the Kryptonians.
Yes. That, I think,
With
to
his
me,
parents.
that's what I sort of alluded to in the intro, where I think it's what they do with a couple aspects of the core mythos, especially choosing to skip over a retelling of the Superman origin and like begin in the, several years into his career. Then to rewrite it in a fairly significant way, to me, is quite damaging. And especially coming after Man of Steel, as you gestured, which makes Jor-El such a, you get 20 minutes of the Jor-El movie, sci-fi epic on Krypton, and now we're, gonna make him actually like essentially ethno-fascist who's like sending Superman to dominate humanity. Like, that's actually pretty damning in my opinion.
Yes. Okay, I really want to explore that. Just while you mentioned him passing over how he approaches sort of the origin stuff, in an interview, I came across James Gunn talking about the direction for DC Studios. And he said, there's certain things I never need to see again. And one of them is a pearl necklace breaking and falling in an alleyway. Don't never need to see that again. Going back to the C.S. Lewis quote that I've used in different reviews and that you mentioned, this whole idea of myth as being repetition of a pattern. Clearly, Gunn does not understand Superman on the mythic level. He understands him as a comic book, but that's the thing that Snyder's operating on a different level.
Yeah.
Snyder's very interested in Superman as a myth. Gunn is not interested in Superman as a myth, which is why he can say things like, it's not important that we repeat these certain visual elements. Whereas I've previously argued in other areas that it's like the power of that image of the pearls falling is you could have Zack Snyder show that in, 5 seconds in Batman versus Superman, and we've already been triggered and understand that, oh, okay, the origin story is being signaled. He's repeating that pattern to make a point. Gunn doesn't seem aware of how these visuals and the mythic dimension operates, and so he's not like interested in repeating those. Whereas like you don't have to retell the basic origin story again. I understand that Man of Steel is all about like how do we tell the origin in a strange and different way. But the fact that you're not even being like, okay, we don't even there's almost scorn for like whether you'd show the image of, the Superman's little ship, the Kryptonian ship like crashing or anything.
Yeah.
Shows to me why he just doesn't get this on a mythic level. And then that feeds into the whole aspects of the Kryptonians and the parents.
And I think the flip side is that I think there's a sense some people have that the film is then emphasizing his human parentage, but I didn't get that at all. I was baffled that those two characters would have been even this Superman's adopted parents, frankly. They seemed so out of place, and like, maybe it's coming after Diane Lane and Kevin Costner. I'm like, what? Those are Superman's parents?
Yes. No.
Really?
It's of a piece with Gunn's absolute stereotyping of people.
Yeah. And some people say, oh, that shows your contempt for the Midwesterners.
No, it's because Gunn's like, we have to have Midwesterners, so they're going to have to be overweight, and they're going to have to talk like they like are really slow. Like what I'm saying is you can just see how certain things, whether it's Jalrapur, whether it's the Baravians, whether it's Midwest Kansas, he only understands these things in complete stereotype fashion. And I frankly find, I'm often like, I don't want to get too worked up about it, but you're like, I just find it stupid and insulting almost. And also just it points to this movie as being like, what a stupid understanding of the world.
it really bugged me. And then, to have then Bradley Cooper in there, and then to have it, I don't know. It just.
So what do you make of that? So my reading of this film is that it wants to get rid of the sense that Superman's abilities in him being super is linked in any way to sort of his lineage.
But of course it is.
And
Yeah.
Because that would be sort of, I don't know. Well, but you're like, is this because it's too elitist? But inherently, a Superman is an elitist thing.
Yeah.
And that's why the Snyder approach was all about, okay, so how does that fit with regular people? Okay, it becomes the exemplum that people can aspire to or reach to, and that can be motivating for your regular person. And I actually like the moment in this movie where it's like, it's trying to build, and it does it in kind of a superficial way, but you're like, it's trying to build this connection of like, why would the guy making falafels or some sort of street meat, why does he care about Superman? But it doesn't go with that far enough.
I know.
It just
I actually
does
thought that
in a
was the one moment that
simplistic
could have
way.
been interesting, and that guy's willingness to sacrifice himself because he knows that Superman can do things. Because he knows that Superman can do things that he can't. He doesn't want Superman to die.
So he's
for him.
like, I'm willing to
Superman,
do this.
I'm
Like
willing to do this
Superman-
because you're my friend, and I know that you have powers that I don't, and you're going to go save the world. And that's actually heroic on his part. And the movie actually kind of makes a joke out of it with the Russian roulette. And it
has to
makes
turn
me
it into a joke.
angry, actually.
Yeah. But people are like, well, no, that scene, it's played for, sadness and because he has his little heroic moment in the newspaper and stuff. And I'm like, but Luthor makes a joke, and yeah, Luthor's a sadist, but that joke is the exact same type of joke that we get from Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl, who are heroes. So your tone is the same for your hero and your villain. So what's going on here?
Yeah.
Sir?
What is this? Crypto! What the hey, dude? I thought you destroyed the whole Superman robots. I thought I told you to keep an eye on him.
We feed the canine, but he is unruly. And he realizes we are not flesh and blood and couldn't, in our heart of hearts, care less whether he lives or dies.
It seems like because these stories have been done so many times, every single new person to tell it, even in the comic books, not even just films, right?
Yeah.
Want to give their own new take, and they want to give a spin to try and speak into some kind of meaning of what it is to live in the world right now. And so this idea of like chosen goodness or adopted destiny, that's more important than this kind of fated destiny.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that leads back into Gunn's misunderstanding of myth. Because, okay, so you change this, so now Superman is just not a Moses story anymore.
Yep.
It's gone. All the Jewish aspects of it, bam, gone. Like, and Superman is created by Jewish guys to be essentially undoing of the Ubermensch,
Yep.
like right before World War II. Like it's all right in the character. That's the point of him in so many ways in those early ones. And wait, this movie's supposed to be anti-fascist, but you've like unbaked some of the aspects of that from the very origin of the character. Okay, so I just don't like that idea of it's tinkering to try to go to some depth, but it actually makes it shallow.
It's the sort of thing where you're like, it's an interesting idea to pull on that thread and be like, okay, wait a second. If the Kryptonians sort of could anticipate their superiority to humans, would they sort of be like, oh, you should just sort of hide yourself? What would that be? But the way they pull on the thread really interferes with, as you said, with like the whole hero myth aspect of this story. So to me, it's like it's done in a way that just shows, again, a lack of awareness of like the mythic dimension here.
To kind of take it full circle, you said, Anson, that like it's like they are afraid of the sort of Ubermensch aspect of the character, right? Like, or the elitism, if you even want to just use that term, right? And you can critique that. Like, Alan Moore did it in Watchmen. Alan Moore took that critique of superheroes and explored it. And you don't have to agree with it, but it's a serious critique that he explored. And as you said at the beginning, I think, Antoine, you said, this movie wants to have its cake and eat it too.
Aaron, yeah.
It wants to say, or Aaron, yeah, that this movie is, interested in, trying to say, oh, we don't want to explore that. We don't want to embrace this problematic fantasy or whatever. But it does. It absolutely does, and it's so juvenile, and not either just embrace it as a children's fantasy that could be really fun, or accept that there might be some complicated and difficult aspects to it. But this movie doesn't want to do that.
Thank you. No need to thank us, sir, as we will not appreciate it. We have no consciousness whatsoever. Merely automatons here to serve. Meet 12. She's new.
He looked at me.
14 fractured bones.
Damage to bladder, kidney, large intestine, lungs.
With a healthy dose of yellow sun, we'll have you up and at 'em in no time.
So we've talked about this film, and we can't help but keep talking about those earlier incarnations of Superman on screen, whether it's the animated series, Max Fleischer, the Richard Donner film, Singer, Lois and Clark on television, maybe. There's so many different screen Supermans. So I want to ask each of you the question of, you both of you have revisited them recently, at least a few of them. In your opinion, what's the best Superman film? Not a perfect one, but what's the best of all the Supermans on screen? What's your favorite? Aaron, why don't you start?
So I think the best Superman movie is Batman versus Superman. And I know a lot of people would be like, well, that doesn't really count, or it's a terrible movie, or whatever. I think it's the movie that wrestles most compelling to me with the question of what does Superman actually mean to the world as it exists, and what a understanding and tension that would create within our own. It's just the movie that wrestles with the question of Superman, good or bad, kind of thing. And I find it the most compelling in that sense. I think it's just a super awesome movie in the ultimate cut, as like kind of a superhero epic. And I consider it more of a superhero. I consider it more of a Superman movie than like I would not say Zack Snyder's Justice League is a Superman movie. He's in it, but I don't think it is like just about Superman. I know there's the aspects of like it's about his resurrection, but he's not in it for half the movie.
Exactly.
Right. And again, Batman vs Superman, it's framed from Batman's point of view a little bit more. So, but again, that's the useful framework because Batman's us and Superman is not us. Superman's more than us, whatever. So that's my controversial answer.
Anton, what about you? What's the best Superman on screen or like film representation?
I think it's a shame that technology didn't sync up with Christopher Reeve. I wish that we could have seen Superman fly in a realistic, awe-inspiring fashion with Christopher Reeve as Superman. All that said, I think that Superman by Richard Donner, 1978, is and probably will remain like the quintessential take on Superman on film.
Yeah.
I think it's not a perfect movie. There's a lot I think is just like silly or stupid about it. There's a lot I love about it. It's hard to almost watch today if you can't turn off your mind to the lackluster special effects and the way they look today. And that
it doesn't bother
I know
me.
that doesn't bother us, but that is an issue for a lot of people watching today. But it's the movie, like it is a movie classic, I think. There's scenes in that movie that I think like a wide cut of people out there will know what that's from. Even the silly...
And not just the action, not even the action, just the action.
Like, even the silly ending where he's going to turn back the Earth. Like, it's an absolutely ridiculous idea, but it's kind of like a classic movie moment. I think people will, for better or for worse, people will always be working against that telling in the motion picture form. And I think a lot of that has to do with Christopher Reeve.
And I think the very fact that even this movie feels compelled to use snippets of John Williams' Superman theme from that movie shows that in a way that, people have felt comfortable creating completely different Batmans than Danny Elfman's and score and things like that, or and I actually appreciate that Zack Snyder didn't go that route and was just, bolder in a sense.
On the score level?
Yeah, on a score level. But I'm going to have to agree with you. I probably think the 1978 Superman is probably the best overall film version of Superman. Though there is a strong part of me that wants to make an argument that the Max Fleischer serials of the 1930s and early 40s are the best, but they're not really films. So
Well, no, they are, but they are films.
Yeah.
They played in
they
the
played in theaters because there was no television at the time.
Yeah, they're
so
short films.
What I find fun about them is that the mythos hadn't really even distilled yet, right? These are made like within 5 years of when the comics first came out.
I'll change my answer. It's the Fleischer. Like, I think the Fleischer is the best Superman in terms of what we've seen on screen. If it's outside of comic book form, I think that's the best Superman. Just like my view for the best Batman that's out of the comic book is the animated series.
Yeah.
The Fleischer is wonderfully distilled, and you get like the patterns in every single short. So it's always like, it gives you a little crystallization of his origin at the very start,
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. The infant of Krypton is now the Man of Steel. Superman!
And it's funny the way, in Lois will do the exact same thing. Plucky journalist, so curious, will pursue something, get into trouble, and Superman will have to rescue her. Superman's powers are restrained. There's something very delightful and wonderful about those. I also think that it's a very sort of limited drawing of what Superman could potentially be, and it's not even, because it's so early, it's not interested yet in sort of what's the significance of this figure, which to me is why I might go with the Donner, even as much as I love the Fleischer, because it hasn't had the time to be what does Superman mean? Because it's still this new thing.
But that's, I think, why it's unencumbered by it in a way that every single Superman movie that's come after is. Every single
one. And because Superman is so archetypal, because Superman has such incredible powers, you're right that every single film from 1978 onwards is grappling with how do you actually tell a Superman story? Because everyone kind of knows it. We all understand that he's sort of all powerful, and so everyone's always been grappling with that sense. So there's something to what you're saying. I totally agree.
Well, then maybe you're already answering the question, the second of the actors, of the core characters. Who's the best Superman as Superman?
I mean, I think Christopher Reeve's probably just the best across the board.
Yeah.
I really like Henry Cavill as Superman. He barely plays Clark Kent.
Exactly.
But I even actually like some of the early Clark scenes and the scenes on the farm. They're quite good.
Yeah. I like
Costner.
his relationship with his parents, yeah.
Yeah, but I think Reeve is just one of those home runs in terms of casting.
He is Superman in a way that he never really escaped that.
And the thing is that he plays the difference so well between them because he's so bumbling as Clark, but he's lovable and really well-meaning, and he's so exceptional as Superman, but he's still well-meaning. It's just he frames it in such a different manner, but he's not. When people are his Superman's corny, I'm no, his Clark Kent's corny. His Superman's not really corny. He's just kind of classic,
Upon rewatching them, the reason I love Christopher Reeve so much is partly it's the range that we get all the different aspects of Superman. It's not just sort of the godlike figure. It's not just kind of the fun that Superman can have with his abilities, which I think Corn Sweat does a good job of dealing with. But it's the fact that really no one else has ever explored the Clark Kent character the same way as those films. And I think it's a real shame. And I think people are really missing the point when they say we can't have Lois not know that Clark Kent is Superman.
Yeah. Or at least start that way and then...
Yeah, I don't think you can sustain that forever. But I think you could go a movie, and I think the reason why is because you have to understand. It's going back to the Batman stuff that the Nolan Batman movies do so well. It's you're playing characters, and one of the great things about Christopher Reeve's Clark Kent is that he's so bumbling and silly at times, but there's always a knowing with the audience. He's always kind of almost has a wink back at the camera of hey, look at what I'm doing here.
It's the scene where he catches the bullet and he looks down and kind of smirks to himself. and he's smirking for us, and you're
And
like,
that's what sells it, because there is a fun, there's just like a fun situational like comedy you can do with mistaken identity that most superhero movies are so afraid of, because people will be like, well, you couldn't recognize him with glasses, like, you know, why couldn't you? And you're like,
this movie even has to put in the hypno glasses.
but so why is it that I can believe that there's a guy who has a ring that can project some sort of like, you know, green beam that does stuff, and I just buy that? It shows like what people accept and not is such like a convention, because you're like, why can't I buy that you can't tell Clark Kent's Superman?
Officer? Good evening, Officer Mooney. Well, they say confession's good for the soul. I'd listen to this man. Take him away.
Yeah, no, I agree with Reeve. I think he's both the best for both.
And he can wear
but
the
I
tights.
but
I will give credit to Dean Cain as being someone in Lois and Clark that like he just kind of had the tights outfit too. And he actually did a good job of just being like Superman in a kind of a very...
Well, that entire television show did what you were saying, which is recognize the situational comedy and romantic aspect of Superman and focused on that. What makes it is not that it's necessarily a great show, it's that is a really underappreciated aspect, and the show really embraced that, and it was fun for that reason. So maybe this also we could ask, who's the best Lois Lane on screen? Because I don't think it's Margot Kidder.
Okay, who do you think?
I actually have to say that I was going to say Lois. I think Terry Hatcher might be my favorite Lois Lane, because the show is really her show, right? First and foremost, it's actually almost more about Lois than
and
it
her
is about
figuring
it's
out
like
who
those
this
old
guy
Superman.
is.
Yeah, and remember, like there used to be like Lois Lane used to have her own comic book. Like I have some of my dad's old issues, right? And that kind of thing. But I'll give a special shout out to I really like Amy Adams Lois, even though she's a lot of people might be skeptical of that, because I think she has that tenacity, and I buy her as like the tough reporter. I was impressed with Brosnahan, but she's really not given near enough to do. Like completely wasted almost, because I think there's moments where I could buy her as the tenacious reporter who gets in over her head. And
For
stuff.
some reason, only Batman movies, TV, etc. has ever had the comfort of like exploring the non-super characters in greater depth and being like, oh, you know what, like Alfred's actually a pretty interesting character if we give him some time. And so it's like I feel like none of the recent movies have ever recognized that Lois Lane is a character that has like huge potential. And I agree that like Brosnahan, like she had a lot of potential, and you see it in certain scenes.
Yeah.
And then the movie for the second half is like, we're okay, now you're just gonna fly like Mr. Terrific's spaceship. And you're like, that's not Lois. Like her curiosity and drive to get the story has to be like so strong that it both like causes and solves problems.
Yeah.
And it has to, maybe it's like also reflects what we think of sort of journalism today and its sort of lack of the prestige maybe it had earlier. But like there's something about like this character should have so much more going for it if you just deal with her as a character and not just an adjunct or appendage to Superman.
What do you think, Aaron?
I mean, yeah, I think Margot Kidder's the best because she's just hilarious, frankly. She's just really funny to watch on screen.
She gets some great scenes, too.
Yeah, and her and Reeve have really good chemistry because they're allowed to develop the chemistry as Clark and Lois, which is not what most actors are allowed on the screen. And because the tension of she doesn't know in the first movie that he's Superman, but she might suspect it at a couple moments. And again, that creates romantic tension, narrative tension, etc. So she's just given meatier stuff to do, but she also has that kind of, it's a little bit of screwball in her performance.
Yeah.
Specifically, His Girl Friday, that kind of like, she's smarter and she knows.
Get the scoop.
And, you stupid, it's the newsroom idea.
That's what the original Superman has also, that great newsroom, His Girl Friday, 1940s kind of stuff.
Yeah, because it understands the classical conventions and uses them well. And so I think she's the best.
Any other, specific character? I mean, we talked a little bit about Lex Luthor's. Do you think Is Hackman the best Luthor, or do you think?
I don't know. No, I don't. I can't like. No, like I was like I don't love Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
There's a certain pleasure in like the way he chews up the scenes, but so you're like I don't know. Like I really honestly like I didn't like Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor when I first saw Batman vs Superman. It's grown on me. Nicholas Hoult does a really good job of sort of capturing a larger range kind of the character where it's like, I'm really smart, I'm a mad scientist, I'm also like a tech billionaire, like, you know, so there's something appealing about him just sort of going for like the broadest approach to the character and then also committing to just go with it. And he actually sells like
going bald.
He sells the bald like really well. Like it just...
Yeah.
Like, it was well done.
No, I might be tempted to say that he might be the best.
Yeah, he just seems the most like that's Lex from the comics. Hackman is just Hackman.
Yeah.
Spacey is trying to be Hackman.
Yeah.
Eisenberg is like his own bizarre thing that he's doing, which works for that movie, but not necessarily like it's not like a perfect Lex. It's like a very good character for that scenario.
Another thing I'll give credit to this latest Superman is that I actually thought that Jimmy Olsen was well cast, and making Jimmy Olsen like a likable, important character was like a good way to deal with it, not just sort of like the nerd who does nothing.
Not killing him off as the CIA asset in the desert at the beginning. It was Batman Superman.
Oh my goodness.
No, I also appreciated what's his name? Skylar
Gisondo. Yeah.
Gisondo. Of course, I love him from Gideon from
He's a very
Richard
likable
Simpsons.
Yeah, and like so again, Jimmy Olsen had his own comic at one point.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's like it's kind of nice for him to get an actual subplot.
He actually gets to do something.
And
Yeah, exactly.
that's like the sort of thing where you're like, Gunn's understanding of kind of the comic book world gives him ability to do and bring in these certain elements in a way that other directors haven't. But then he can't get past like this sort of smug tonal approach to things that really handicaps, I think, what he can do with a character like Superman, who, I'm sorry, but a lot of comic book characters are just, they're fun, fine, but they can never go the distance like a Spider-Man, like a Superman, like a Batman, and so you gotta handle them differently.
Yeah, those three, I think, are the ones who, as you say, they are mythic. They have those repeated patterns and tropes that you have to do in order to establish the character. And ultimately, that's, I think, maybe where we come around to say that I think Gunn's film is a missed opportunity. There's some moments of promise, but the actual film and filmmaking is sadly not up there. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Three Brothers Filmcast.
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
I bid you farewell.